Hey there, drowsy historian here. Tonight we're drifting off to the soothing sounds of distant artillery, sloshing mud, and the gentle scratching of lice under your collar. That's right, we're headed to the Western Front, where the air smells like wet wool and rotting flesh, and the only thing louder than the screaming is the silence that follows. Forget valour, forget honour. You're about to spend months, maybe years, ankle deep in disease water, waiting to die for a stretch of land no one will remember. It's not glamorous, it's not heroic, but it is unforgettable. Mostly because you'll never sleep the same again. So before the trench collapses or your gas mask fails, go ahead and like the video and subscribe. But only if you enjoy calmly narrated tales of slow, historical misery. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. I like knowing who else is falling asleep to the sound of human despair. Now take a breath, just one. The air's not great, get comfortable, because tonight you're a World War I infantryman, and no, there's no way out. You arrive in the dark, not metaphorically, though that too, but literally, because the train dumped you somewhere in France at night, and no one's bothered to tell you where here is. The air smells like manure, smoke, and something you sincerely hope isn't human. You're wearing a uniform that doesn't quite fit, boots that rub your ankles raw, and a helmet shaped like someone stepped on a pot lid. Your rifle already jams. You've never felt less prepared for anything in your life, which is fine because no one really expects you to survive. There's no fanfare, no flags, no speeches about duty and sacrifice, just a bored corporal with a clipboard barking numbers and pointing at mud. You follow the man in front of you because he seems slightly less confused than you are. The group you're lumped in with all look the same. Blank faces, nervous hands, and a silent shared hope that maybe the real fighting is somewhere else. That hope doesn't last long. A shell goes off in the distance. You flinch. No one else does. That's your first lesson. The next is the smell. The trenches are still miles off, but the wind carries whispers of what's waiting. Decay, sweat, old blood, and the sour stink of things left too long in the rain. You're herded into a barn with a roof that leaks and straw that smells faintly like mildew and something worse. There's no bed, just a plank of wood and a rat the size of a house cat who watches you like it's sizing up your face for chewing. The other men sleep with their boots on. You follow suit. You're learning, fast. No one tells you what your job is. One day, you carry crates. The next, you dig a trench that immediately collapses. Orders are vague, redundant, and shouted by people who look more exhausted than you feel. You stop asking questions. You just do as you're told and hope the rations arrive before the rain does. When the food shows up, it's grey. When it doesn't, you chew on a biscuit so hard, it chips a tooth. At some point you realise you've stopped looking people in the eyes. You've stopped expecting dry clothes. You've stopped thinking about when you'll go home. And then, just as quietly as it began, the waiting ends. Someone yells that you're moving to the front. No farewell, no good luck. Just a long march through deeper mud, past stretchers you don't look at, toward a line of trenches that look less like protection and more like graves waiting for names. You climb down into the muck. Your boots vanish. So does the last of your optimism. Welcome to the war. You thought training was hard. You thought being shouted at by a man with a moustache so thick it needed its own postal code was the worst thing that could happen to you. Marching in the rain, standing in formation until your knees locked, peeling potatoes until your fingers bled. That was hell, wasn't it? That was the crucible of war. That was where you'd be made into a man. Except, of course, it wasn't. It was theatre, a pageant of preparation that gave you the illusion of readiness, like painting a target on a cardboard box and calling it a tank. Basic training didn't prepare you for anything. It just made sure you could die in uniform without tripping over your own rifle. They told you it was about discipline, about building resilience, What they didn't tell you was that none of the yelling, sweating or marching would matter when your boots disintegrated after a week of rain, or when your fingers were too numb to load your rifle, or when the man beside you exploded without warning. You learned how to make a bed so tightly a coin could bounce off it. No one taught you how to sleep standing up, or in 4-minute increments between shellings, or while sharing your blanket with lice. You spent weeks practicing how to salute properly. Now, the only people worth saluting are either dead or about to be. There was a structure to training, drills, routines, schedules. You hated it at the time, but at least it was something. At least it made sense. Out here, nothing does. You dig trenches in places they told you were already dug. You march east only to be told you are supposed to go west. Orders change by the hour, but you're expected to keep up. Out here, discipline means not screaming when you step on something soft that used to be human. It means staying still when you want to run, and moving when your legs are begging you to stop. There are no medals for doing things right, only consequences if you don't. Back in camp, you were given a daily ration of food, usually disgusting but edible. Here, you're lucky if your meal arrives warm, or at all. You used to complain about the blandness of your stew. Now you scrape mould off your bread and chew it anyway, because the alternative is hunger, and hunger makes you stupid. Training warned you about dehydration. It didn't tell you you'd end up drinking water filtered through sandbags and rat droppings. You used to carry a canteen like it was sacred. Now it's just another grimy relic you pretend still does its job. You remember your drill sergeant saying something about brotherhood, camaraderie. That war would bind you to the men beside you like nothing else. And sure, that's true. In the same way, a shipwreck bonds you to whoever happens to be clinging to the same piece of driftwood. You don't talk about your feelings out here. You don't open up. You share cigarettes, grunts, and the occasional look that says, "If I die, don't waste my rations." Some men sing, others pray. Most of you just stare. It's not that you don't care about each other. You just don't have the energy to pretend you'll all make it out. The uniforms were crisp back then. Your boots were stiff, your buttons shiny, your weapon oiled and clean. You looked like a soldier. Now, you're soaked through to the bone, wearing 3 layers of damp wool that itch like punishment. Your helmet is dented. Your rifle is rusting. Your socks are stiff with old blood. Yours or someone else's, it hardly matters. You haven't shaved in weeks, and your breath smells like meat gone wrong. You'd be unrecognisable to your own mother if she could even see you through the smoke. The worst part, you still believed it back then. The speeches, the slogans, the posters with heroic faces marching off to glory. You actually believed you'd be brave. That courage was a thing you could conjure when needed. But out here, courage looks like crawling into the mud and pretending you're invisible. It looks like keeping your mouth shut when someone starts sobbing in the dark. It looks like surviving, even when part of you doesn't want to. In training, they told you to be strong. They never told you what strength actually costs. There's a moment that sticks with you. You were standing in formation during a downpour, rain dripping from your nose, uniform clinging like a second skin. The sergeant yelled something about grit, about enduring hardship. You remember thinking, this is it. This is me at my worst. But it wasn't. Not even close, because now, as you crouch in a trench filled with freezing sludge, watching steam rise from the body of a man who used to have a name, you understand something your instructors never said aloud. The worst is not an event. It's a place you live in, a state you never leave. You keep telling yourself the training helped, that it gave you a foundation, a way to cope. But really, it just gave you a script, one you've long since stopped following. You don't march anymore. You slog. You don't shout. You mutter. You don't dream. You flinch. They trained you to aim, fire, reload. They didn't train you to watch someone bleed out from the neck and keep your hands steady. They didn't train you for the smell of a wound gone septic. They didn't train you to dig a grave in mud while whispering the wrong name because you didn't know the right one. So yes, training was hard, but it was also clean. contained, supervised. You never thought you'd miss it. Now you'd give anything to go back to those miserable drills and meaningless punishments, not because they were good, but because they ended. Out here, nothing ends. It just gets quieter, then louder, then quieter again. And through it all you keep going, because no one taught you how to stop. The first thing you notice is the mud. Not regular mud, not the kind you used to trudge through as a child or curse at during training. This mud has depth, intent, personality. It grabs at your boots with greedy fingers and refuses to let go. It swallows everything. Your footing, your socks, your hope. Every step is a gamble. Sometimes you sink ankle deep. Sometimes it's knee deep. Once you watch a man disappear up to his thighs before two others haul him out like he's caught in quicksand. No one laughs. The mud doesn't just slow you down, it keeps souvenirs. The second thing is the smell. It's the kind of odour that feels like it's been cooked low and slow over the course of months. A stew of rot, sweat, feces, gunpowder, and something metallic you quickly realise is blood. It clings to your clothes. It seeps into your pores. After just a few hours, you stop noticing it consciously. Your brain gives up. But deep down, something in your animal instincts keeps screaming that this is not a safe place. This is not where humans are supposed to be. Then comes the noise. Not the noise of battle, not yet. The trench has its own language, quieter but somehow more disturbing. Sloshing boots, ragged coughing, the constant drip of water finding its way through every surface. Somewhere nearby, a man mutters to himself in a low, steady rhythm, over and over again. You don't know if it's a prayer, a memory, or just static his brain picked up from the shelling. And then occasionally there's silence, sharp and sudden, as if even the war is holding its breath. That's when you feel most afraid. Your assigned space is about 6 feet long, 2 feet wide, and waist deep in filth. The walls are supposed to be reinforced with wooden planks, but many have rotted through. The rest are slick with moss, mould, and something you don't want to investigate further. You're told to dig a sump to keep water from collecting underfoot. You dig, of course, and the water laughs. The hole fills faster than you can empty it, and within minutes, the trench is back to its usual consistency. Human soup. There's no such thing as dry anymore. Not your socks, not your rucksack, not even your cigarettes, which crumble in your fingers like wet tissue. Your hands are swollen and cracked, your feet squish when you walk, and you're starting to understand why people here talk about trench foot the way others talk about wolves or storms. A creeping inevitability that devours you slowly. You've seen a man pull off his boot and peel away a chunk of skin with it. He didn't scream, he just sighed, like he already knew. And then there are the rats. You meet your first one on your second day, nibbling on the edge of your blanket with the calm entitlement of a landlord collecting rent. It's huge, not large, huge. You could put a saddle on it. Its eyes reflect your candlelight like it's mocking you, and when you try to shoo it away, it bares its teeth. You've never seen a rat look insulted before. Later that night, you find 2 more sharing your rations. One of them is sitting directly on your biscuit, staring you down as it eats. You let it finish. The rats live here. You don't. That's the unspoken truth of trench life. You are the visitors. Temporary, interchangeable. The rats have names, territories, social structures. They breed in the walls and feast on the fallen. You once watched one gnawing on a severed finger like it was a snack. Another crawled into a dead man's mouth and curled up like it was a bed. No one stopped them. There's a mutual agreement now. They won't bother you too much while you're alive, and you won't begrudge them when you're not. Sleeping is complicated. You sleep in shifts and never well. The ground is too wet, the walls too cold, the constant knowledge that a shell might hit too close, or not close enough, keeps you hovering at the edge of rest. When you do sleep, it's the kind of sleep that leaves you more tired than before. You wake up with your back screaming and your face pressed against a surface that smells like mildew and sweat. Once, You wake up with a beetle crawling into your ear. You don't even panic. You just flick it away and roll over. Meals are brought up when they can be. You eat from a dented mess tin while balancing on one knee, trying to keep the mud out of your food. It never works. Everything tastes like dirt and metal. Sometimes, you chew something chewy that shouldn't be, but you swallow it anyway. Hunger trumps doubt. You used to gag at the sight of gristle. Now you gnaw on it like it's a delicacy. No one asks questions about the meat. You've all seen what happens to horses out here. There's no privacy, none. You piss in a tin, you shit in a box, and you bury both somewhere you're almost certain won't be dug up again, by accident. Hygiene is a fantasy. You haven't washed properly in weeks, and neither has anyone else. You're all starting to smell the same, a collective stench of men decomposing very, very slowly, while still alive. You try not to look too closely at the sores on your skin, or the blackness starting to creep up your toenails. If something falls off, you'll deal with it then. After a few days, the trench starts to feel normal. Not good, not safe, but familiar. You learn where to step to avoid the worst puddles. You figure out how to balance your rifle so it doesn't rust overnight. You stop reacting when someone coughs up blood next to you. This isn't survival, it's adaptation. You're not living through it. You're becoming part of it. A soggy, lice-ridden extension of the trench itself. And deep down, part of you knows, if the trench wanted you gone, it would have swallowed you already. So you stay. You slump in your corner of the mud pit and listen to the scurry of rats behind you, the groans of men nearby, and the endless, eternal drip of water from a place that should have run dry long ago. You tell yourself you'll get used to it, that this is just another phase, another hardship, another test of your endurance, but you're wrong. This isn't a test. This is the curriculum. Everything before this was just orientation. Life in the trenches never stops being awful. It just becomes familiar. You wake up damp, already cold, and vaguely nauseous from a combination of hunger, rot, and the kind of sleep that leaves your joints locked, and your mouth tasting like old copper. There's no sunrise to greet you. Just a vague lightening of the grey sludge sky, barely visible through the tangled netting and broken boards overhead. You sit up, your spine cracking like someone stepped on a bundle of kindling, and prepare yourself for another day of nothing in particular and everything at once. There is no schedule, no clock, just an endless rotation of tedium and terror. Sometimes you're handed a shovel and told to dig a trench, a latrine, a drainage channel, or maybe just a hole no one intends to use. Other times you're told to stand guard and watch an empty stretch of mud for hours, straining to see movement that never comes until, all at once, it does. You don't blink as much as you used to. Blinking is how people get shot. So you stare, and when your eyes water, you just let it happen. Then there's the freezing, the kind of cold that doesn't stay on your skin, but burrows into your bones, like it's setting up a permanent residence. You try to keep moving, try to keep the blood flowing, but some mornings you can't feel your hands until noon. You stamp your feet, rub your arms, press your fingers into your armpits, but it never helps for long. The damp makes it worse. It creeps into your clothes, your bedroll, your lungs. You cough in bursts, rattling and wet, and so does everyone else. The whole trench sounds like a tuberculosis ward. You spend hours shoveling mud that never leaves. Every scoop you toss out gets replaced by another that sloughs back in. It's a Sisyphean farce, a joke no one's laughing at. You scrape, dig, haul, only for the wall to collapse or the floor to rise again under a heavy rain. Sometimes you find something buried, a boot, a rusted tin, a bone. You don't say anything. If it's a man, someone will mark it. If not, it goes back in. You don't have time for archaeology. The dead are part of the infrastructure now. You eat when you can and what you're given. Cold beans, a slice of bread that could stop a bullet. Maybe a sliver of cheese if someone in supply was feeling generous or guilty. You don't ask where the meat comes from anymore. If it's hot, you're grateful. If it's not, you eat it anyway. Hunger turns everything into a flavour. Even mud has a taste now. Earthy, metallic, faintly fungal. You know this because it's gotten into your canteen, your food, your teeth. You've been chewing on war since you got here. The latrine is a hole in the ground, surrounded by sandbags, and the kind of smell that makes your vision blur. You try to hold it in until you can't. Then you balance precariously, pants down, knees trembling, hoping no one lobs a shell during the most vulnerable 30 seconds of your day. You've heard stories of men dying like that, mid-squat, pants around their ankles. There's no dignity in this war, but that's one way you definitely don't want to go. You wipe with whatever you can find. Sometimes it's newspaper, sometimes it's your own sleeve. People start to unravel. You can see it in their faces, which go slack and pale, like wax figures left too close to the fire. Some mutter to themselves constantly, others go silent for days. There's a man in your unit who used to recite poetry. Now he just rocks back and forth, eyes wide, lips twitching. You try to help at first, ask if he's all right, offer him a bit of chocolate. But after a while, you just avoid his corner of the trench. You have to. Madness spreads here, like mould. If you watch it too long, it finds a way in. Shells come when they want. There's no rhythm, no warning. Just a sudden roar, the earth heaving like a beast beneath you. And then the dull thud of impact, sometimes near, sometimes far too close. You hit the ground by instinct. Sometimes you scream. Sometimes you just clench every muscle and hope you're not next. Shrapnel doesn't care who you are. It slices clean through flesh, bone, hope. You've seen a man cut in half and still twitching. You've seen a headless corpse sitting upright, like it hasn't caught on yet. There are quiet moments too. Long, terrible stretches where nothing happens. These are worse in their own way. They give your mind room to wander. You think about home, about food that isn't grey, about dry socks and actual silence. Then you remember you're not supposed to think. You're supposed to wait. Because when something does happen, it will happen fast and it will not wait for you. So you count things. Footsteps, breaths, drops of water falling from the trench roof. You hum songs with no words. You press your fingers into the mud just to feel something colder than you. Evenings are worse somehow. The darkness settles like a blanket made of wet wool, heavy and stifling. Lamps are rationed, and candles flicker weakly in jam tins nailed to posts. You write letters by dim light, saying things you don't mean to people who will pretend to believe you. You say you're fine. You say the lads are holding up. You say the rations are getting better. You fold the lies neatly and lick the envelope shut, sealing in the version of yourself that no longer exists. Then you tuck it away and hope a rat doesn't eat it before morning. You sleep in shifts, if you sleep at all. The trench wall becomes your pillow. The man beside you becomes your heater. You wrap yourself in your coat, curl up like an animal, and pray you wake up still breathing. Some nights you don't sleep because of the shelling. Some nights because of the cold. Some because of the fear. And sometimes, worst of all, because it's too quiet. And your brain has finally started trying to process everything it's seen. That's when the real horror sets in. Not the blood, not the gore, the waiting. Eventually, the sun rises again. Not that it matters. Another day begins, indistinguishable from the one before. You stand, stretch, piss into a tin, and look around at the same grey faces doing the same grim rituals. No one speaks unless they have to. There's nothing to say. The routine continues, the rot continues, and so do you. Because in the trenches, routine is survival. Repetition is the only anchor in a place designed to drown you. So you dig, you wait, you freeze, you get shelled. And if you're unlucky enough to survive all that, you do it again tomorrow. You stopped feeling your toes 3 days ago. At first, it was just a dull ache, the kind you get from marching too long in wet boots. Then the tingling started, then the cold. Now it's nothing. A numb, swollen silence from the ankles down. You haven't dared take your boots off to look. No one has. There's a sort of unspoken superstition about it. as if the rot isn't real until you witness it. But you've seen what happens when others do, and you'd rather not be next in line for amputation by bayonet. The water never leaves the trench. It gathers and sits and waits for your feet to marinate. Your socks are always wet. Your boots are worse. Every step is a squelch. Every movement a reminder that you're walking on softening meat. Trench foot, they call it. Sounds clinical, manageable, but that's just the polite version. The real one involves your skin sloughing off in layers, your toes turning waxy and white, like something left too long in the freezer, and eventually, if you're unlucky enough to still be alive, the black creeping in, inch by inch, like mould up a wall. You try the tricks they told you, swapping socks, rubbing whale oil on your feet, wiggling your toes when you can, but there are only so many dry socks to go around, and no one's seen whale oil in weeks. Some men have resorted to cutting holes in their boots for drainage. Others have wrapped their feet in newspaper, or whatever paper isn't already being used as toilet roll. None of it works for long. The wet always wins. It seeps through leather, fabric, skin. Eventually, it gets into your blood. That's when the fever starts. You've seen it happen. A man takes off his boot, peels back his sock, and half his foot comes with it. There's no screaming, just a kind of stunned silence, followed by a quiet, "oh," like he's just remembered something important. Then the medic comes. If you're lucky, you're carted back for treatment. If not, you sit tight, pack mud around the wound to keep the flies out, and wait for something worse to kill you first. The trench doesn't forgive weakness. It just makes room for it. Of course, trench foot is just the beginning. There's a whole bestiary of ailments that come free with your enlistment. Lice are a constant companion. You feel them before you see them. The itching starts on your scalp, your back, your groin. You scratch until you bleed. Then you scratch some more. The lice nest in your seams, in your socks, in the folds of your coat. You try boiling your clothes when you can, holding them over a fire, even lighting matches against your shirt. They always come back. You've stopped asking how. Someone in your unit jokes that the lice are the only ones thriving in this war. You laugh, but you know it's true. They feed on you every night. You've grown used to the sensation of crawling. You even give them names, if only to feel a little less powerless. There's Frank, who lives near your left hip, and Morris, who's made a home somewhere in your armpit. You've never seen them, of course, but you know they're there. You feel them in your sleep. You dream of scratching and wake to blood under your nails. Rashes are another delight. They spread in damp folds, behind your knees, under your arms, along your thighs. Red, blistering welts that sting when you walk and ooze when you sit. The medic gives you a tin of ointment that smells like vinegar and despair. You smear it on when you remember. Mostly, you try not to touch anything, which is difficult, considering everything is always touching everything else. Your skin has become a patchwork of irritation, peeling and cracking like old paint. You've stopped asking whether it's normal. There are other things too. Fungal infections with names you'll never learn. Boils that rise like angry volcanoes, hot and pulsing, until they burst on their own or are lanced by a bayonet heated over a candle. One man had a sore behind his knee that turned green. Another had what looked like a second belly button, except it wept pus and smelled like fish left in the sun. No one talks about these things. You just watch, make a mental note, and hope your turn isn't next. And through it all, you keep moving. You hobble, limp, stagger through your daily chores. You dig with raw hands and rotten feet. You carry crates while scratching at your spine. You huddle beside other men who reek of infection, their uniforms crusted with dried blood and old sweat, and you pretend you don't notice. No one complains anymore. Complaining requires energy. You're all saving yours for the next gas alarm, or artillery blast, or trip over a corpse that no one's had the time to bury. The medics do what they can. They're tired, overworked, and running out of everything. They slap on bandages, bark half-hearted orders, and hope you don't die in the middle of someone else's treatment. You learn to lie to them. If you say it hurts too much, they might pull you off the line, but not to safety, just to a colder, wetter trench, slightly farther from the front. If you say nothing, you might keep your spot near the brazier, so you say you're fine, even when your heel is coming apart like damp bread. You think back to what the recruiters told you, how the war would be over by Christmas, how you'd be home to cheers and parades, medals pinned to your chest. No one mentioned that your feet would rot in your boots before the enemy even saw you. No one mentioned that you'd be more likely to die from mould than bullets. No one said the true enemy was moisture, that it would eat you alive from the bottom up. Eventually the pain dulls, not because it's gone, but because your body can't keep up with it. It's learned to tune out the signals. Your feet are just things you drag behind you now. Your skin is something you carry like a wet coat. The itching, the burning, the peeling, all background noise. What matters is staying alive, breathing, eating, not falling asleep with your socks on, or worse off. You measure time by how many toes you still have. You count blessings in fingernails. You're not clean. You're not whole. You're a damp-infested collection of semi-functional parts, still pretending to be a soldier, but you're not alone. Every man around you is breaking in the same quiet ways, and somehow that makes it easier. You limp together, you itch together, you rot together, and as long as you're still upright, still breathing, still moving through the sludge, you tell yourself you're surviving. Even if deep down you know you're not. You didn't think much about food when you enlisted. Maybe you imagined mess halls with steaming bowls of stew, crusty bread, the occasional tin of peaches if the quartermaster was in a good mood. You were wrong, so very tragically wrong. What passes for food in the trenches is more threat than sustenance, a cruel experiment in how long a human being can survive on starch, salt, and blind hope. You no longer eat to feel full. You eat because it's the only activity that occasionally distracts you from the trench trying to swallow you whole. Your day usually begins with breakfast, a term you now understand to mean a handful of things that technically have calories. This might include a piece of hardtack, also known as a biscuit if you're being generous, or a dental hazard if you're being accurate. It's a pale, rock-hard slab of baked flour that could double as a blunt weapon. You don't bite it so much as gnaw on it. Soften it with whatever liquid you have, tea, water, spit, and hope it doesn't splinter like ceramic and slice open your gums. Many do. You've seen men bleed from the mouth, just trying to get a bite down. Then comes the bully beef. It arrives in greasy tins, congealed and trembling with the kind of texture that reminds you of meat left too long in the sun. It's grey, sometimes pinkish grey if you're lucky. You're not sure what animal it used to be. You stopped asking. You can eat it cold, but it's marginally less revolting if you heat it up over a candle or the barrel of your rifle. You chase it with dry bread or a ration cracker, something equally flavourless, but at least structurally stable. Sometimes you mix it all into a slurry, which tastes just as awful, but at least only requires one swallow. You do occasionally get stews. If it's been a good week for supply runs and the kitchen staff isn't entirely dead inside, someone will boil down leftover meat, canned vegetables, and whatever vaguely edible substance they can scavenge into a hot meal. The result is a sort of beige broth, flecked with floating bits of carrot, potato, and maybe rat hair. You learn not to look too closely. Texture is irrelevant. Temperature is king. If it's hot, it's good. If it isn't, you eat it anyway, and pretend it is. You have a whole internal vocabulary now for lies you tell your stomach. Sometimes there's jam. This is considered a luxury. It arrives in tins the size of your fist, usually plum or apple, though occasionally something more ambiguous like mixed fruit, which tastes like sugar and regret. You spread it on hardtack, or eat it directly with a spoon, or barter it for extra tobacco. One tin can make you feel rich. temporarily. Then it runs out, and you return to the meat-paste diet that reminds you how little joy remains in this world. Tea is constant, though never quite right. It's made from water that tastes faintly of mud and rust, boiled in a dented pot and stirred with whatever was lying around. Sometimes it's strong. Sometimes it's brown water with a dead fly in it. You drink it regardless. It's warm, and warmth is a currency of its own. You've seen men break down crying over a hot mug on a cold morning. Not because it tasted good. It never does. But because it reminded them, if only for a moment, of something that didn't feel like war. On rare occasions there's cheese. This comes in square, waxy blocks that smell vaguely of feet and despair. You carve off a slice with your bayonet and eat it with the same solemnity as someone attending their own funeral. The cheese doesn't melt, it crumbles, it sticks to your teeth, it haunts your breath for days. Still, it has fat and salt, and that makes it valuable. You ration it like gold. You dream about it. You start ranking cheeses by their ability to make you forget where you are, even if only for a bite. Then there are the rats. You don't eat them, not officially. But you've heard stories, always from someone who heard it from someone else, about men who've gotten desperate enough. Skin it, cook it over a fire, douse it in enough jam or salt to kill the flavour, and down on it like penance. You don't know if the stories are true, but the longer you're out here, the more plausible they sound. When the supply lines break, when the biscuits run out and the bully beef turns green, you start to look at anything that moves with a different kind of hunger. Spoilage is constant. Tins rust, bread moulds. Sometimes you open a can and find the meat inside bubbling slightly, like it's alive. You scrape off the top and eat the rest. No one throws food away. No one can afford to. You once saw a man eat a sandwich he dropped in a puddle of blood. You didn't even hesitate. You didn't judge him. You just watched and wondered how many seconds you'd have waited before doing the same. You lose weight, everyone does. The fat melts off first, then the muscle. Your belt gets tighter, your uniform hangs loose. You grow pale, hollow, your skin stretched thin like paper over bone. The hunger is constant, not sharp, not urgent, just there gnawing at the edges of every moment. You think about food more than you think about the war. Roast chicken, eggs, fresh bread, a ripe apple. You'd kill for an apple. Not metaphorically, literally. If someone handed you one, you'd consider murder. Your taste buds change. Things that once repulsed you now pass for edible. Things that were merely bad now seem delicious by comparison. You stop noticing texture. You stop noticing flavour. You eat to continue. You eat to keep your stomach from folding in on itself. You eat because not eating means weakness, and weakness gets your place on the stretcher cart or worse. There is no pleasure in it, only necessity. You've learned the rhythm now. Tin, biscuit, tea, rot, mould, mystery meat, jam if you're lucky, cheese if you're blessed, and maybe, just maybe, a stew on Sundays that tastes only mildly of death. You sit on the edge of the trench, your mess tin in your lap, chewing in silence as the rats scurry by and the wind carries the scent of something burning. You don't ask what it is. You don't want to know. You just keep chewing, because that's what you do. Mail call is the closest thing to religion you have left. It doesn't happen on a schedule. It doesn't come with ceremony. Someone just walks down the trench with a canvas sack and starts calling names, most of which are mispronounced or already dead. You listen anyway, perched on the edge of a crate, or your own folded knees, waiting for the impossible. A letter, a scrap of something, a reminder that the world outside this mud-slicked hellhole still exists. If you're lucky, you hear your name. If not, you pretend you didn't expect anything anyway. When a letter does arrive, it feels holy. You run your fingers over the paper before opening it, half afraid it will crumble, like everything else. The writing is familiar, sometimes shaky, sometimes too cheerful to be real. You read it slowly, the way you'd sip a drink you know will be your last. A mother asking if you're warm enough. A sweetheart sending her love in looping cursive. A younger sibling describing their school day as if it might matter. It doesn't. Not really. But you read every word twice, sometimes 3 times, until the ink feels like a memory pressed into your hands. You write back. You always write back. Even when your fingers are too numb to grip the pencil, even when the candle burns low, and the rats are too close, and the shells are falling somewhere in the distance. You find a bit of paper, a page from a supply manifest, the back of someone else's form, maybe even the inside of a cigarette tin. You don't tell the truth. You can't. There are rules about what you can say, and even if there weren't, you wouldn't. No one back home wants to read about trench foot or frostbite, or the smell of someone dying 6 feet away. So you lie. You tell them the food is fine, that your mates are in good spirits, that the captain's a decent bloke and the weather's not too bad. You say you're staying dry, even though your socks are currently fermenting around your ankles. You say you're safe, even though the man who shared your foxhole yesterday is now in pieces beneath a tarp. You end with something hopeful. I'll be home soon. Tell Dad I'm thinking of him. Give the dog a scratch behind the ears for me. You fold the paper neatly and seal the lie with a shaky hand. You begin to live for these exchanges. Not the content, necessarily, but the ritual. The writing, the waiting, the reading. It becomes a tether, fragile but real, to a version of yourself that still smiles, still jokes, still belongs to something other than mud and death and tea with bits in it. You start counting days by letters received, weeks by replies. A month without mail feels like a year. 2 months, and you start to wonder if your family has forgotten you. 3, and you wonder if they're gone. Some men get packages. You've seen a tin of biscuits passed around like treasure, the corners soft with age, the contents crumbled but still sweet. A scarf knitted by a sister. A cake, rock hard but precious, full of raisins and hope. You once saw a man cry because someone had sent him socks. Clean, dry, unsentimental socks. It was the most useful act of love he'd ever known. You understand now why mail is hoarded, why some men keep their letters wrapped in oilskin, tucked inside their tunics like armour. Words matter more than bullets some days, and yet even the mail becomes part of the theatre. The censors read everything. Whole lines blacked out, entire sections missing. You try to word things carefully, slipping truths between platitudes, hoping the man with the red pen is in a generous mood. You've mastered the art of euphemism. It's been a bit rough means someone was vaporised 2 feet away. Weather's been poor means 3 days of artillery fire and a trench that smells like open wounds. Your family never asks for details. You're grateful for that. Sometimes, though, the letters stop coming. You don't know why. Maybe something happened back home. Illness, accident, grief too heavy to write through. Maybe they wrote, and the mail got lost, eaten by rats, soaked through and discarded by someone too tired to care. Or maybe they just couldn't bring themselves to keep pretending. You don't blame them. You wouldn't write to yourself either, if you knew what things looked like on this end, if you could smell it. When your name isn't called, you sit a little straighter anyway, just in case. When someone else gets a letter, you glance at it without meaning to, trying not to envy the way they smile at familiar handwriting or hold it close to their chest, like it might warm them. You begin to think in sentences you'll never write. You compose letters in your head during quiet moments, knowing full well you'll forget them before you find a pencil. Dear Mum, I saw a man drown in mud today. Dear Elsie, I haven't felt my hands since February. Dear God, if you're listening, I'm not sure I want to go home anymore. And then sometimes letters come from strangers, condolences sent to the wrong man, mixed up envelopes, a piece of someone else's goodbye. You read them anyway. You read everything. Names, addresses, details of lives you'll never know. It helps somehow to remember that the world is bigger than the trench. That somewhere, someone is still living a life that doesn't involve boiling lice out of their shirt seams. Eventually, you stop expecting mail. You stop hoping. When something does arrive, it's a surprise again, a gift, a voice from the other side of the mud. You hold it in your hands longer than you read it. You try to remember what it felt like to be the person the letter was written to. Someone whole, someone missed. But you're not that person anymore. You're just a body in the muck, going through the motions of connection. Still you write back, because that's what you do. Because there's always a chance someone's waiting on the other end of the lie. Because even if the words are empty, the act means something. And because in a world where everything rots, burns or bleeds, paper, ink and a few well-placed sentences might be the last things keeping you human. At some point, you stop thinking of the rats as intruders. They're too common, too confident, too loud at night to be considered anything but residents. Tenants, maybe. Landlords, more likely. The trenches belong to them now. You're just borrowing space. They come in all sizes, but the most memorable are the ones that could feasibly wear a harness. You once saw a rat the size of a toddler dragging a crust of bread into a dugout like it was carrying a briefcase to work. No one stopped it. No one dared. They live in the walls, in the sandbags, in the corpses, especially the corpses. You learn quickly that the dead are never left alone for long. If a body lies in the trench overnight, it becomes a banquet. The rats chew through uniforms, skin, organs, whatever's available. You try not to look when you pass them. Try not to think too hard about the way a dead man's lips can disappear overnight, or why his eyes are missing the next time you see him. You used to be horrified. Now you just mutter "poor bastard" and keep walking. They're fearless. That's the worst part. They don't scatter when you approach. They stare back at you, whiskers twitching, like they're trying to decide if you're food yet. They climb into your kit bag. They gnaw on your boots while you sleep. You wake up to the sound of them wrestling under your blanket, fighting over crumbs or maybe just asserting dominance. You swat them away, but they always come back. You can kill one, maybe two, but for every rat you crush with your trench spade, 3 more show up to attend the funeral. Some men try to fight back. They set traps, fashion crude weapons, declare nightly rat hunting contests. The scoreboards are painted in blood and boredom. But it's a losing battle. You might get a few, but the rats never stop coming. There's always more. They breed in the shadows, beneath your floorboards, behind the latrines. You've seen nests packed with pink, hairless, squirming things. 12 per litter, born and raised in the war like it's their natural habitat. Maybe it is. Maybe they've evolved for this. They don't just eat the dead, they eat the living too, in small ways but meaningfully. They steal your rations. You've opened a tin only to find rat teeth marks around the edges. You've reached into your haversack for bread and pulled out a hollowed crust already half digested. Sometimes they go after your soap or your socks, or a letter from home. They're not picky. You once saw one dragging an entire tin of jam down a drainage trench, like it was on a grocery run. The man it belonged to cried harder over that loss than he did when his friend got shot. The noises they make are worse than the sights. The constant scratching, the scurrying just past your line of sight, the wet chewing sounds that come from somewhere beneath your bunk at 3 a.m. It's not just disturbing, it's maddening. You've had full conversations while staring at the ceiling, pretending the sound of tiny feet wasn't driving you slowly insane. Some men snap. They scream at nothing. Others try to sleep during the day instead, when the rats are less bold. But even then, they come. Day or night, the rats don't care. You've heard stories, everyone has. Of a man who woke up with one chewing on his ear. Of another who found a rat curled up in the cavity of a missing lung. There's talk of someone who fed his own toe to a rat just to watch it eat. You don't know which stories are true. You don't want to know. What you do know is that nothing seems to work. Not shouting, not smashing, not praying, the rats remain ever present, ever hungry, and completely uninterested in your suffering. They start to become part of the routine. You count them. You name them. There's Big Al, who lives near the cook fire. Sergeant Whiskers, who runs the night patrol by your feet. Percy, the one-eyed freak that stole half a tin of bully beef and vanished into the wall like a magician. You catch yourself talking to them sometimes, muttering threats or bargains, asking them not to chew through your boots again. You don't expect a response, but if one of them nodded, you probably wouldn't be surprised anymore. There are superstitions too, old wives' tales recycled into trench folklore. If a rat crosses your path at night, it means death is coming. If it won't go near your bedroll, it means you're already a corpse in spirit. Some men believe that feeding the rats appeases them. Others believe that killing too many will bring bad luck. You've seen a man cry after crushing one beneath his heel, muttering about balance like he'd just upset the gods. You don't question it. Out here, belief is just another way to keep from screaming. Occasionally, someone gets creative. A man builds a rat trap from a sardine tin and some wire. Another fashions a makeshift flamethrower from lamp oil and a broken lighter. For a moment there's laughter, camaraderie, a sense of victory. Then the smell of burnt fur hits your nose, and the laughter stops. You spend the rest of the night gagging into your sleeve, wondering if you'll ever eat meat again without imagining it squeaking. Eventually, the rats stop feeling like animals. They're part of the landscape now, like mud, or lice, or gunfire. You stop reacting when one brushes your leg. You flinch less when you feel them climb over your pack. You get used to the weight of one perched near your shoulder while you try to sleep. It's not affection. It's not comfort. It's just survival, yours and theirs, intertwined by filth and necessity. If you drop dead tomorrow, you know what they'll do. They'll start with your eyes, but until then you coexist, badly, uneasily. You give them space and they give you nothing. Not mercy, not fear, not even respect. They are the true victors of this war, thriving, multiplying, devouring everything in their path. They don't care who wins, they never did. They'll be here long after you're gone, nesting in the ruins, raising new generations in the rib cages of the forgotten. And when history looks back on all this, the rats will still be here, watching, chewing and waiting. It begins as a distant thud. Not loud, not urgent, just a low, far-off heartbeat in the sky. You barely notice it at first. You're busy scooping mud out of your trench, or tying a bandage that won't stay dry, or trying to remember what warmth felt like. But the sound grows. The air tightens. The ground begins to hum, and the thud becomes a boom, then a crack, and suddenly it's not distant anymore. It's here. The shelling has started again. You hit the floor out of instinct. Everyone does. It's not bravery, it's not training. It's just survival, hardwired into your muscles now. You flatten yourself into the mud, face pressed to the earth, spine curled like a dog trying to disappear. There's nowhere to go, no cover. The trench is supposed to be safe, but you've seen what a well-placed shell can do to 6 feet of dirt, and the men hiding inside it. You've seen trenches collapse like they were never there, swallowed whole by the earth they were meant to tame. The sound is all-encompassing, not just noise and pressure, like the air itself is caving in. Each blast slams through your body, like a fist to the chest, rattling your teeth and buzzing in your skull. Dirt showers down in clumps, boards shift, someone screams, maybe from pain, maybe from panic. You don't look, you don't move, you just wait for the next one, then the next, then the next. Eventually, it stops. The silence is worse, because now you don't know what's coming. When the shells are falling, you can brace yourself. You can curl up and wait. But when they stop, suddenly, inexplicably, your mind begins to fill the space they leave behind. Maybe they're reloading. Maybe they're moving in. Maybe they're just letting you breathe before taking it away again. You try to sit up. Your hands shake. Your vision swims. The world has become too quiet too fast, and your brain doesn't know how to handle it. They call it shell shock. Later, when the war's over, when the doctors and officers and politicians need a name for the thing that's hollowed you out. But right now, no one calls it anything. It's just how you are now. You twitch at shadows. You flinch when someone drops a cup. Your heart races when you hear boots running, even if it's just someone late for their watch. You're always listening, even when you think you're asleep. Sleep is another casualty. You drift off only to wake up gasping, ears ringing from explosions that aren't there. Some nights, you dream of the shells before they hit, long, slow descents through the sky, trailing smoke like ribbons, aimed just for you. You wake up already ducking. Your mates don't comment anymore. They have their own dreams, their own shivers, their own private moments of panic, tucked into corners and blinked away like tears. You learn to judge range by sound. A high whistle means it's going long. A flat, low growl means it's coming close. You listen for the whine, that sharp ascending pitch that means a shell is falling fast and doesn't care who's underneath it. You become a connoisseur of destruction. You can tell the difference between field artillery and naval guns just by the way the blast feels in your ribs. You shouldn't know these things. No one should. There's no pattern, no warning. Sometimes the shelling lasts minutes, sometimes hours. Once it went on for 3 days straight. You lost count of the impacts after the first 100. The trench filled with water, mud and chunks of men who had been standing upright 10 seconds before. You couldn't eat, you couldn't sleep. You just crouched wide-eyed in a corner and waited for the ground to swallow you whole. It didn't. You were lucky, other men weren't. When it ends, when the guns go quiet and the air settles again, you don't feel relief. You feel dread, because now you have to stand up. You have to climb over the bodies and start digging out the trench again. You have to count heads, patch wounds, sweep aside the worst of the gore, and pretend everything's fine. You have to look men in the eyes and act like you're not wondering which one of them will be next. And you have to do it all while your ears ring and your teeth chatter and your hands shake, like they've forgotten how to stop. Sometimes, it's not just your hands. Your whole body betrays you. You drop things. You stammer. You forget names, faces, what day it is. You drift into memories without meaning to. Then jolt back, like you've been slapped. You've seen men lose the ability to speak after a blast. Others scream when touched. Some simply stop reacting at all. Just sit there, staring, even while their boots fill with blood. The officers don't know what to do with them. So they disappear. You try to hold it together. You crack jokes. You pretend it's all a game. Just a bit of music from Jerry, someone says when the next barrage begins. They must really like us. Everyone chuckles, then drops flat again. You laugh because you have to, because crying doesn't help, and praying feels dishonest. The gods left the trenches months ago, chased out by rats and mustard gas. All that's left now is dirt and noise. After a while, the shelling becomes part of you. A rhythm, a backdrop. You stir your tea with trembling fingers, while the ground shakes. You clean your rifle, while explosions rattle the sky. You learn to speak in pauses, shout a sentence between blasts. Finish your thought after the next one. It becomes normal. Not comfortable, never safe, but expected. You adapt, because you have no other choice. One day, long after this war ends, you'll be home. You'll be sitting at a kitchen table. Someone will open a cupboard too fast. A tin can will fall. It will hit the floor with a dull metallic clang. And you will hit the ground, arms over your head, heart in your throat, convinced that the shelling has found you again. It never really stops. Not once you've heard it. Not once it's lived inside your skull for weeks, months, years. You'll try to explain it to people. To your wife, your children, your friends. They'll nod, eyes wide, trying to understand, but they won't. Not really, because unless you've laid face down in mud, while the world explodes above you, unless you've waited for death with every muscle clenched and your teeth grinding against the taste of blood and dirt, you can't know what it's like. You can't understand how silence can feel like a threat, or how thunder can sound like a lullaby. But you'll know. You'll always know. You learn about gas the same way you learn everything else out here, the hard way. There's no textbook, no briefing, no clear instructions beyond put the damn mask on. One moment, the air smells like the usual stew of sweat, blood, and burned coffee. The next, there's a sharp alien sting in your nostrils, like someone's poured bleach into your lungs and lit a match. You don't need anyone to tell you what it is. Your body knows before your brain does. Your throat tightens, your eyes start to water, your chest begins to seize, like it's rejecting the very idea of breathing. The first time it happens, it takes you too long to react. Everyone scrambles at once, tripping, cursing, slapping at their kits in panic. The gas masks aren't where they're supposed to be, or they're missing filters, or they're cracked. You fumble with the straps, fingers slick with mud and adrenaline, trying to remember which buckle goes where. Around you, the air turns greenish-yellow, thick and oily like poisoned fog. It creeps low, hugging the ground, and you realise too late that your corner of the trench is downhill. You get the mask on eventually. It doesn't help much. The rubber is old, the filter questionable. Your breath fogs up the eyepieces, and now you're choking in the dark, with only the sound of coughing and retching to guide you. Someone nearby didn't get their mask on in time. You hear them gagging, hacking, screaming like their lungs are trying to escape through their teeth. Then the screaming stops. That's worse. Mustard gas isn't immediate, it's patient. It soaks into your clothes, your boots, your skin. You don't feel it right away. It gives you time to forget it happened, to crawl back to your post and try to breathe normally. Then hours later, the blisters start. First your hands, then your armpits, then your groin. Places you didn't even realise were exposed. The pain is slow and rising, like water boiling over in a sealed pot. You try to ignore it until you can't. By then, your eyes are swelling shut and every inch of your body feels like it's on fire. Chlorine gas is different, sharper. It hits fast, like being punched in the throat by an invisible hand. Your lungs seize, your mouth fills with foam. You double over, trying to vomit and inhale at the same time, which doesn't go well. The gas doesn't kill you cleanly. It kills you theatrically. Bodies convulse, eyes bulge, men claw at their throats, their faces, the sky. You've seen a man drown in the open air, choking to death, in 2 feet of trench water because his lungs stopped working and he couldn't stop coughing long enough to crawl out. The masks aren't much better. They help, but only if everything goes right. If you get it on in time. If the filter's dry, if the rubber hasn't cracked, if the gas isn't too concentrated. Sometimes you put on your mask and die anyway. You've seen it happen. A man sitting perfectly still, gas mask secure, body twitching like a puppet on fraying strings. You can't do anything but watch. You can't even hear him scream properly. The mask muffles it, turns it into something low and wet and terrible. The worst part is how silent it can be. There's no bang, no siren, no dramatic announcement, just a sudden shift in the air, a smell that doesn't belong. Someone shouts, "Gas!" and it's already too late for half the trench. You sleep with your mask strapped around your chest now. You've practiced putting it on, in the dark, blindfolded, with one hand. You time yourself. Under 10 seconds is the goal. You once managed 7. That's probably the only reason you're still alive. Gas drills are a farce. You line up, put on your mask, walk in a circle, then take it off and go back to pretending you're ready. But you're not. No one is. You're ready for bullets, for explosions, even for bayonets. You've made your peace with most of that. But gas is different. Gas feels personal. It doesn't just wound you, it invades you. It finds the cracks in your gear, in your skin, in your sanity, and when it gets in, it doesn't leave. You've seen the aftermath too many times. Men covered in yellow burns, eyes swollen shut, lips blistered and bleeding, coughs that never stop, skin peeling away like old wallpaper. They don't scream for long. Their voices give out. Then they just moan. Then they stop. Sometimes they're still alive when that happens. You can't tell. You don't ask. You just cover them with a tarp if you have one, or turn away if you don't. There are makeshift remedies. Pee on a rag and breathe through it. That's one of the classics. It's supposed to neutralize chlorine. You don't know if it works. You've done it anyway. When the choice is between humiliation and suffocation, pride dies quickly. Another trick is smearing your face in mud. Might help, might not. You do it reflexively now, just in case. You don't know what's superstition and what's survival anymore. You don't care. You've heard rumours that the enemy has something worse. A new gas, stronger, invisible, kills in seconds. Maybe it's true, maybe it isn't. Doesn't matter. You live with the knowledge that, at any moment, the air itself might try to kill you. That's just part of the deal now. You've stopped flinching when someone shouts. You just grab your mask and hope. Not for safety, not for victory. Just that, if it happens, you'll get it on, in time to make it to the next hour. You used to worry about dying. Now you worry about how. Will it be quick? Will it hurt? Will anyone know who you were? Gas makes those questions louder. A bullet is clean. A shell is fast. But gas lingers. Gas is a slow, suffocating decline, dragging your body inch by inch into a version of itself you won't recognize by the end. You pray it won't be you. Then you look around and see the odds. There's no warning, no justice, no escape. You don't win a gas attack. You just survive it, if you're lucky, and carry the consequences in your lungs for the rest of your life, if you live long enough to have one. So you sleep with your mask on your chest, check your filter every morning, and flinch at every unfamiliar breeze. Because when the wind changes out here, it doesn't bring rain. It brings death. Congratulations, you didn't die. That's your qualification. Somewhere, someone scribbled your name onto a crumpled list and drew a line next to the word corporal. That's all it took. You outlived the man before you. Maybe you ducked faster. Maybe you were just standing a few feet to the left. Now you've got a stripe on your sleeve, a few extra responsibilities, and the distinct honour of telling other men where to stand while they get torn apart. Leadership, it turns out, is mostly about proximity to death and your ability to yell convincingly over gunfire. No one congratulates you. No ceremony, no handshake, no extra rations. Just a muttered, "You're in charge now," and the sudden realisation that half a dozen tired faces are now waiting for you to make decisions. The same people who passed you tins of bully beef and helped you dig latrines last week are now supposed to follow your orders. They don't look thrilled. You don't blame them. You wouldn't trust you either. Your first task as corporal is a classic. Organise a work detail for something that sounds important, but probably isn't. Dig a new latrine trench, move sandbags, retrieve a shipment that may or may not exist from a location that may or may not still be standing. You're given vague directions by a lieutenant who hasn't set foot near the front line in 3 days. And then you're left to figure out how not to get anyone killed while doing whatever it was he barely explained. You nod like you understand. Then you walk away and try to make it up as you go. Being in charge doesn't mean knowing anything. It just means being the one everyone blames when things go wrong. The trench floods. You didn't plan well. Someone steps on a mine. You should have marked it. The rations are late. That's your problem now. You didn't ask for this, but you also didn't refuse it. Refusing things gets you noticed, and getting noticed gets you voluntold. That's when you're not offered a choice, just the illusion of one. You don't volunteer, you get volunteered at. Voluntold happens all the time. Someone needs to go on a supply run through a muddy death field. You're told you seem like the type, need someone to inspect a collapsed dugout that may still be full of corpses and unexploded shells. Guess what? You're due for field experience. You try to delegate, but your men look at you with the kind of hollow exhaustion that says, "Please, not me," and you end up doing half the jobs yourself anyway. Not out of nobility, out of math. Fewer of them means fewer names to write letters home about. Morale is a word officers like to use during meetings. They say it's important. They say it needs to be maintained. What they mean is, don't let the men openly cry where others can see it. You're expected to keep them steady, like you're a priest or a school teacher or a particularly stern mother. But your men aren't children. They're just tired animals, twitching under stress and pretending to care. You give pep talks that sound like death threats. You joke when you should reassure. You hand out extra cigarettes and lie about how long the next shift will be. Sometimes you see real fear in their eyes. Not panic, that's loud and brief. Fear is quieter. It settles in like mould. It curls in the corners of the trench and inside the folds of their blankets. It doesn't scream, it waits, it eats. You try to look braver than you feel, not because they need a hero, but because if you crack, so does everyone else. You tell them it's fine, that the shelling's moving away, that the gas won't come tonight, that someone higher up knows what they're doing. Lies are just another part of the uniform now. You also learn about cowards, not the cinematic kind, not the ones who run screaming into the woods, tearing off their helmets. The real ones are quieter. Men who stop moving when they're supposed to charge, who lose their rifles, who suddenly can't hear commands during an advance. You notice because you used to consider it yourself. The mind plays tricks when it's trying to survive, but now you're the one who has to say something. Or look the other way, or fill out a report you know will ruin someone just as broken as you are. Then there's the paperwork. You didn't think there'd be paperwork in a trench, but here it is. Casualty forms, supply requisitions, damage assessments. You scribble names, dates, and vague descriptions in the muddiest handwriting you can manage, hoping no one notices how often you've left things blank. You weren't trained for this. You were barely trained to aim. Now you're expected to manage logistics while ankle deep in sewage and halfway to starvation. You use your own blood as ink once. No one notices. You try to remember what you were before the stripe. Not a leader, just another frightened man with a rifle and a growing collection of nightmares. You used to make jokes, real ones. You used to feel like part of something. Now you feel separate, above, but not elevated, just exposed. Like a sandbag placed higher on the wall to catch the first bullet. You tell yourself it's temporary, that someone else will take over soon. But they don't. They die, or go missing, or start muttering in their sleep and never stop. Your men still talk to you, sort of. They ask about rations or shifts or how long until the next rotation. They don't ask how you're holding up. You don't ask them either. There's an understanding. Feelings are a liability. If someone starts to cry, you don't comfort them. You just look away until they stop. You used to hate that. Now you're grateful. The less anyone knows, the longer they last, including you. Being a corporal doesn't mean you're brave. It means you're unlucky enough to still be breathing when someone needed a name. You do your best, not because you believe in anything, but because someone has to. You keep the line moving. You keep the trench dug. You keep the men breathing, if not living. And when they ask you what the plan is, you give them a look that says, of course there's a plan, even though you're just making it up as you go, like everyone else. Because in this war, leadership isn't strategy, it's inertia. Whoever survives longest makes the rules. You hear the word, leave, and for a brief shining moment, you almost smile. It's a word soaked in possibility, like the promise of escape, the distant memory of comfort. They say it with the same weight as a reward, like you've earned it, like you're going somewhere good. But the truth is, leave isn't what you think it is. It's not freedom. It's a pause in your suffering, just long enough to remember what it felt like to be human before they throw you back into the meat grinder with a fresher face and a slower limp. When it happens, it's abrupt. One morning, an officer with a paper and a pen calls your name. You think you're in trouble. Maybe you forgot something. Maybe someone died and now you're next in line. But no, it's your turn for leave. They say it like they're doing you a favour. You're too tired to feel anything at first. Then the panic sets in, because now you have to figure out how to be away from the trench without feeling like you've abandoned something. or someone, or yourself, the journey back is disorienting. You're bundled into a lorry or tossed onto a train with other gaunt, filthy men and sent lurching towards some unnamed village that hasn't heard shell fire in weeks. You watch the landscape change through the cracks in the wood. No craters, no wire, no smoke. Fields with grass still growing, trees still standing. Birds. You'd forgotten about birds. The sound makes your skin crawl. You spend most of the trip gripping your rifle, even though you're told to leave it behind. You don't. It's not for defense, it's a habit now, like breathing. When you arrive, it's quiet, too quiet. The air smells wrong, clean. The ground isn't trying to eat your boots. People walk upright and casually, not crouched or shuffling like they're dodging invisible artillery. Civilians smile at you, nod politely, even thank you. You try to smile back, but your face doesn't remember how. Your uniform stinks. Your fingernails are black. Your breath could curdle milk. You shuffle past shop windows and church bells and small children, and it feels like you've wandered into someone else's dream by mistake. The place they send you is called a rest station. It's not restful. It's a barracks or a converted farmhouse or a church with the pews pushed aside and cots jammed into the aisles. You're told you can take off your boots, so you do, and immediately regret it. The smell alone causes a man across the room to gag. Someone gives you a basin and tells you to wash. You scrub yourself raw and still feel dirty. There's a communal shower, but the water's cold and the floor is slick with someone else's regrets. You go once. That's enough. Meals are technically better. There's actual food cooked by people who aren't dead inside. Real bread, eggs, hot stew that hasn't been spooned out of a tin last opened during the last ice age. You eat too fast the first time and vomit it up behind the canteen. Your stomach isn't ready for kindness. After that, you pace yourself. You eat like you're stealing it, eyes darting around, waiting for someone to tell you it's over. The others try to enjoy it. They play cards, they smoke, they flirt poorly with nurses who smile with dead eyes. Some drink until they forget which direction the front is. You drink too, not for joy, but for quiet. Enough to dull the sounds in your head, the twitch in your hands, the instinct to flinch every time a door slams. You drink until the rats in your memory stop moving, until you can lie down without feeling like you're wasting time. Sleep is strange. Your body wants it, but your mind fights back. The bed is soft, which feels unnatural. You miss the hard, cold floor of the trench. The silence is unbearable. You're used to sleeping to the rhythm of distant shell fire and coughing. Now the quiet screams at you. You lie awake, staring at the ceiling, waiting for something to explode. Sometimes you dream. That's worse. You wake up gasping, fingers clenched around your blanket like it's a bayonet. You stop trying to sleep and just wait for morning. There's no real schedule, no tasks, just vague encouragement to rest and recover. But you don't feel rested, you feel exposed, off balance, like someone peeled off your armour and left you in a world that's too soft, too colourful, too loud in the wrong ways. You miss your trench, you hate yourself for it, but at least there, everything made sense. Here, you're expected to be normal, to laugh at jokes, to nod along when someone says, "At least you're safe now." Safe. You've forgotten what that means. If you're lucky, you get a few days, maybe a week. You lose track quickly. Time works differently, outside the wire. Hours stretch and snap, and before you know it, someone's calling your name again. You pack your things, you button your coat, you step back into your boots, which haven't dried, and feel the trench come rushing back through the soles of your feet. You nod at the other men. No one says anything. There's nothing to say. The trip back is quieter. You don't look out the window. You don't hold your rifle like a lifeline. You just sit, breathing the stench of fear and foot rot and quiet resignation. You're going back. You always were. Leave wasn't a gift, it was a pause, a brief window to remind you of what you're no longer part of. A reminder of what peace looks like. just long enough to make returning feel like punishment. And when you step off the truck and smell the trench again, you don't flinch. You just walk back to your post, duck under the lip of the parapet, and sit down in the mud like you never left. The others barely acknowledge you. One man hands you a tin of tea, another points at the latrine. Everything continues as if you were never gone. Because you weren't. Not really. You just stepped outside the nightmare for a few days, but the dream didn't change. The war kept going. The rats kept breeding. The mud kept rising. And now, so have you. Back into the same wet uniform, the same dull rhythm, the same slow crawl towards something no one dares name out loud. At first you notice, every time. The moment it happens, the sound, the stillness, the way someone who was talking a second ago is suddenly not. The first time it happens, you can't stop staring. Your brain won't make sense of it. You keep expecting them to move, to groan, to cough, and sit up and complain about the mud. But they don't. They just stay there, eyes open or closed. It doesn't matter, because either way, you know. The absence is louder than the shell that killed them. You remember the first one clearly. His name, his voice, the way he tied his boots too tight, and always shared his last cigarette. You remember dragging what was left of him to the side of the trench, wrapping him in a blanket that did nothing to hide the angle of his legs. You remember digging, slowly, carefully, hands numb from more than just the cold. You remember the prayer someone mumbled, the way no one looked each other in the eye in the silence that stretched on for the rest of the day. After a while, it starts happening more often. A sniper round, a shell fragment, a case of infection that spreads faster than the medics can respond. One day, he's laughing at a filthy joke, and the next he's gone, and his boots are already on someone else's feet. It stops being shocking. It just is. You stop memorizing names. You stop asking about men you haven't seen in a day or two. You assume they're dead. And if they're not, it's a pleasant surprise. The guilt comes in waves. Survivor's guilt, they call it. Though no one ever says it out loud, you feel it when you roll over in your sleep and your hand lands on an empty bedroll. You feel it when you reach for a tin of food and realise there's one extra because someone didn't make it back. You try not to think about why it wasn't you. Was it luck? Timing? Cowardice disguised as caution? It doesn't matter. They're gone. You're still here. That's all the math the war cares about. You develop rituals, small ones. You don't call it mourning. You just do the things you've seen others do. A boot turned upside down. A name scratched into the trench wall. A cigarette placed on a helmet and left overnight. No one says anything about it, but they see. You've all built your own languages for grief. Wordless, grim little ceremonies that help you keep moving. Because stopping means thinking. And thinking is dangerous. You stop reacting to bodies, you still move them. Out of the way, into the pit, down the line. But they're not people anymore. They're objects. Heavy, fragile. Sometimes they're intact. Sometimes they're not. You carry what's left. You do your best not to notice what's missing. You never look at the faces unless you have to. Recognition hurts more than you're willing to let in. It's easier if they stay anonymous. Easier if they're just another weight to be buried. You learn how to dig graves quickly, shallow ones mostly, deep enough to keep the rats out for a day or two. You mark them when you can. A stick, a helmet, a scrap of paper with a name, but the rain washes it all away eventually. Sometimes you bury 3 or 4 men together. Sometimes you don't have the time to bury them at all. You just cover them with whatever you have and move on. You tell yourself you'll come back later. You never do. When someone goes suddenly, a bullet to the head, a blast to the chest, it's easier, quick, clean in a way. No waiting, no screams. But most don't go that way. Most suffer. You hold their hands. You listen to them say things that don't make sense. You promise them things you can't deliver. You'll be all right. Help is coming. We'll get you home. lies, every one of them. But they need to hear them, and you need to say them. You try not to cry, not because you're brave, but because once you start, you're not sure you'll stop. You've seen men sob until they vomited, until they passed out, until they stopped making noise altogether. You've seen others break in quieter ways, staring at nothing, muttering to ghosts. You tell yourself you're holding it together, that you're functional, but deep down, you know you're just another crack waiting to spread. Sometimes, the grief surprises you. A joke reminds you of someone who used to laugh just like that. A song hummed under breath takes you back to a night when you all sat around a fire before the lice and the rot and the silence set in. The memories aren't clear anymore. They come in flashes. A muddy face, a crooked grin, a hand on your shoulder. Then they're gone again, replaced by the weight in your stomach and the taste of dirt in your mouth. You write home about them, but you don't use names. You say, a friend, one of the boys. You don't describe how they died. You don't say what you saw, what you smelled, what it felt like to wipe blood off your own hands with someone else's sleeve. You just say you're sorry, that the war is hard, that people are doing their best. You fold the letter, seal it, and send it off like a confession you don't expect anyone to read. Eventually, you stop saying goodbye. Men vanish and you just nod, move over, and wait for the next name to be called. You keep going because stopping isn't an option. You eat, you sleep, you dig, you reload, you pretend. You learn to live with the ghosts because trying to outrun them is impossible. They're in the mud, in your clothes, in your heartbeat. Every man who dies out here lives on, in silence and repetition and the quiet terror behind your eyes. You're not cold, you're not cruel, you're just full. There's no more room to grieve, no more space for sadness. The war has taken everything it wants, and you've given it the rest. All that's left is habit, motion, the rote mechanics of staying alive one more day. And if someone dies tomorrow, you'll bury them. And then you'll eat your ration, light a cigarette, and go back to work. Because that's what you do. One day someone says it's over, just like that. The shelling stops, the rifles lower, a whistle is blown, not in panic or command, but finality. You don't believe it at first. You've heard rumours before, false alarms, talks of ceasefires that vanish the moment someone sneezes in the wrong direction. But this time, it's real. The war, the endless crawl of mud and blood and smoke, has been paused, finished, declared complete by men in polished uniforms, shaking hands 1,000 miles away from where you've been dying. You stand there, confused, waiting for the joke to land, for the next shell to fall, for the gunfire to resume, but it doesn't. There's only quiet, thick, heavy, unnatural. You should feel relief, celebration, something. Instead, you feel like someone's pulled the floor out from under you, like you've just been told you can breathe again. After spending so long underwater, you forgot how. You look at the men around you, and they look the same, not joyful, not even grateful, just blank. The trenches don't vanish. They sit there, still full of bodies, both moving and still. The rats don't leave. The water doesn't drain. You stay where you are for days, waiting for instructions, because no one's really sure what peace means in practical terms. You eat the same rations. You patch the same wounds. The only difference is the direction of your eyes. For the first time in years, you look forward instead of sideways. Eventually, you're told you can go home. Not immediately. That would be too simple. But soon. Demobilization, they call it. A polite word for sorting out who gets to leave first. There are lists, papers, signatures, delays. You stand in line for hours, then days, filling out forms with hands that still tremble. When they finally say your name, it doesn't feel like it belongs to you anymore. It's just a sound. They issue you clean clothes, a uniform that doesn't stink, a shave, a haircut, a tin of polish to make your boots shine. You look in the mirror and see a stranger. The grime is gone, but the hollow eyes remain. You walk through a station with a duffel bag slung over your shoulder and your name stitched across it in thread that feels like a lie. People smile at you. They say things like, "Well done," and "Welcome back." You nod and keep walking. The train ride home is quiet. You stare out the window as the landscape rolls by. Hills, trees, fields untouched by war. You try to feel something. Pride, maybe. Joy. But all you feel is distance. As if you're watching someone else's return from far away. You touch the glass, half expecting it to break under your fingers. It doesn't. When you arrive, there's a crowd. Family, neighbours, strangers waving little flags. You step off the train into a wave of hugs and cheers, and it's overwhelming in the worst way. Too loud, too bright, too close. You flinch when someone claps you on the back. Your mother cries. Your sister clings to your arm. Your father says you look strong. You don't know how to tell them that you don't feel real, that everything they're touching is hollow. Home hasn't changed, but you have. The walls are still the same colour. The furniture is still in the same place. Your bed still creaks in the same way when you sit on the edge of it. But you lie down and the sheets feel wrong. Too clean, too dry. You stare at the ceiling all night, listening for a sound that never comes. No gunfire, no boots, no rats, just the tick of a clock, slow and smug. Like it knows it outlived your friends. You try to return to your old routines. You eat meals with your family. You walk to the store. You help repair a fence that doesn't matter. People ask you questions, and you answer them. You say the things you're supposed to say, that it was hard but you're fine, that you're glad to be home, that it's good to sleep in your own bed again. You smile at the right moments, you laugh at the easy jokes, and inside you are absolutely nowhere. Sometimes you forget where you are. You hear a door slam and dive to the floor before your brain can catch up. You startle at loud voices. You flinch at the smell of cooking meat. You wake up choking on an invisible gas, your hands clawing at your throat, your sheets soaked with sweat. You don't talk about it. You just sit there in the dark, shaking, reminding yourself that the war is over, that you're safe, that the floor isn't mud and the air isn't poison, but it doesn't feel safe. It feels wrong. Too soft, too clean. You miss the weight of your rifle. You miss the structure, the routine, the clarity of knowing exactly what you had to do to stay alive. Here, everything is blurred. Expectations you no longer understand. Conversations that feel shallow. Gratitude that tastes like guilt. You can't tell anyone what it was really like. They wouldn't believe you. And even if they did, what would it change? You stop writing letters. You stop visiting. You stop going to the events they invite you to, the parades, the dedications, the memorials. You can't stand the sound of bugles. You can't stand the smell of freshly turned soil. You keep your medals in a drawer you never open. Sometimes you take them out, just to confirm they're still there. They feel heavier than they should. People say you're quiet now. Thoughtful, they call it. They don't realise how much you're trying not to speak, not to tell them what a man looks like when his insides are outside, or how long it takes someone to die when their lungs fill with dirt. They don't want to hear about the smell, or the rats, or what it means when someone calls for their mother in a voice that sounds like a child's. So you say nothing. You nod. You go back to your tasks. You didn't come home. You returned. But something stayed behind, buried in the mud, or burned in the air, or eaten by silence. Whatever part of you used to feel fully alive is still out there, crouched in a trench, watching the sky and waiting for it all to start again. You try to be present, to be grateful, to be whole. But most of the time, you just go through the motions. Because the war ended, yes, but you didn't. So that's it. You made it to the end, not the finish line, just the end. Of this story at least, a soft, unravelling conclusion to something that never really had a clean beginning. The war didn't start with a bang for you. It started with a train ride, a muddy step, a nervous laugh, and then months, years of waiting to die in new and exciting ways. And when it ended It didn't wrap itself up like a novel. There was no catharsis, no curtain call, just silence where there used to be screaming. You weren't a hero. You weren't chosen. You weren't brave. You were just a name on a list, one body among millions, thrown into the grinder and expected to march in a straight line while the world burned around you. You didn't save anyone. You didn't win anything. You survived. That's all. And some days that feels like a miracle. Other days it feels like a mistake. People back home will say nice things about you. They'll shake your hand, maybe buy you a drink, maybe call you a patriot, but they'll never understand what you left behind, what you carried back, what stayed inside you long after the boots dried and the uniform was folded away. They didn't smell the gas. They didn't hold the hand of a man who stopped being a man halfway through a sentence. They didn't bury their friends in shallow graves while the sky thundered above. But you did. And now you're here, wherever here is. In a bed, maybe, under blankets, somewhere quiet, somewhere warm, somewhere the air doesn't taste like rotten fear. You can relax your shoulders now, unclench your jaw, let the breath back in. You don't have to keep watch tonight. The war is over, or at least this one is. So close your eyes. Not to forget, you never will, but to rest. You've earned that much. Not a medal, not a legacy, just sleep. The kind that's deep and dreamless. The kind that doesn't end with a whistle. Sweet dreams. Try not to wake up here again.